All right, this is Service API's office hours for June 10th. And we've got a couple things on the agenda and plenty of new issues and pull requests to go through as well. Bowie, did you want to start with this discussion of scope and roadmap for the first alpha release?
Yeah, so probably this is for tomorrow, intended for tomorrow, because I didn't have the doc ready for today. But as we have discussed probably like a humongous swath of things, I would like the group to share an outline to collaborate on what we think the cut line would be for V1 Alpha 1. I think we've touched on a lot of the major issues. Some of them haven't been resolved yet, but it would be good for a discussion overall. So I'm basically telling people to prepare for this tomorrow, of kind of areas that they see that need to be closed, and then we can work really in a focused manner to kind of close them, at least for a V1 Alpha 1 that we can sort of say, hey, we're comfortable with having people try this out in a broader fashion. And, it doesn't mean that the iteration will stop. It just means that we are okay cutting a particular subset of it to be a V1 Alpha 1.
So do you mean by that, that's a line where you're happy that people can attempt to implement the spec?
Yeah, that's right. So like it would be usable to some degree that we're okay, that we can get good feedback on. And it would be not frozen, but we could say use this particular snapshot to kind of give feedback on it. Otherwise, people are giving feedback on a moving target, which can be kind of confusing. That's all I have for that
makes
topic.
A lot of sense.
We'll talk more about it tomorrow.
Sounds good. All right, well, I guess we should move directly into the next discussion item, which is a doc that Danian and Harry had written together. Thank you. And I guess I'll hand it over to either one of you to follow up.
Yeah, sure. I could go first. Yeah. Let me put something in the chat window here really quick. Give me 1 second. Just to help frame the discussion, specifically the background. Right. So today, in order to forward a request to multiple targets, and I say forward a request because what we're talking about is actions, right? And if we look at a rule, it's very singular, right? Where we can perform a match on, let's say, on a path, do some type of modifications using filter, and then again, a common action is forward that request to a target. And so if we want to be able to forward requests to multiple targets, we then have to create multiple rules, where the rules, in essence, would almost be identical, aside from a different target for the action. And so, the background for this discussion in this document is really, what if we look at being able to perform multiple actions within a rule? And that's where we get into option 1 of the proposal. And so
just let me know if you'd rather have the doc or actual code up.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably move back on over to the doc. And so that's kind of the background there that I went through. And so really what we're trying to do is that we can do multiple things after, the goal of this is that we can do multiple things, multiple actions after we perform a match And so Harry and I worked together, came up with a couple options, which I think are very similar. It might be best explained actually going through some of the examples. And I also want to just kind of list the use cases that we're trying to address here, right? I talked about actions being, forward the request to a target, but there's other things we could do, right? One action may be, mirror the request, split, do a traffic splitting, which is essentially, sending that request to multiple targets, and then the filtering, which is, modifying the request. If we go down to example one, very straightforward. This is similar to what we see now. I think the main difference is under rules, you see actions instead of action. Again, this is just pluralizing actions and saying, we're gonna match on foo.com and then just forward to a service named foo. You see the next example with simple traffic split. We're referencing now multiple forward to targets, and each target would have a weight attribute where we can specify sending a certain percentage of that traffic to a particular target. One thing that I did forget to mention in the option one, if we scroll back up there really quick, is that actions are evaluated in sequential order from top to bottom, with the first action being given the highest priority. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. If we go back down to the examples.
So how does that work with the splitting, if it's evaluated from top to bottom?
Let's see here. Let's go to the split example, simple traffic split.
I see. So it's a little bit, there's some merging going on, because if you send 70% and you evaluate it there, then the next thing, if you say 30%, that's actually not, like, you can't consider it in of itself. But I get what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so maybe I need to reword that.
If you really wanted to go down where each action was, considered independently, it would be, instead of weight, it might be probability, and you'd end up with something really similar to what we're doing with IP tables and kubeproxy. I'm not actually suggesting that. I'm just like,
I don't know if that's like very fun to deal with.
No, I don't actually recommend that at all. Yes, terrible idea. But
isn't that sorry guys, isn't what you're saying that it's kind of a conflict resolution thing? If you've got multiple actions that specify a similar thing, then the one that's at the top should be the winner. Whereas when you're talking a forward to thing, like the merging behavior is implied by the fact that there are weights, but it's more about the way that controllers should resolve any conflicts. Like in the event of forward to having the weights, like it's not what you're saying is not you should process these rules and the first one that matches you drop through to. It's when you're processing these rules, the ones at the top like supersede the ones at the bottom. It's just a conflict resolution thing.
Oh, I see. I think I understand what you're saying, Nick.
Yeah.
If I can rephrase it just to check. So it's not the fact that it's a list of step 1, step 2, step 3. It's more that if the set of, it's almost like an unordered set, but if the set of actions have conflicts, you will resolve the conflicts towards the ones that appear first.
That's how I read it. Is that what you meant, Daniel?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we go down to advanced traffic mirroring example, or actually no, go to down to the example of implementation specific action extensions. And I guess this is where I kind of thought maybe we need to have each action prioritized, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't actually need to be prioritized, because my thought is, you know, we match on the request, and the first thing we want to do is authenticate the request, right? And so that's the extension ref saying, okay, here's a vendor specific or an implementation specific authentication extension. Okay, great. We're authenticated. Now we can modify the headers and then forward to the target. Maybe it doesn't need to be prioritized, and we say that just all three of these actions, the extension, the modify, and the forward to, need to be successfully evaluated. But if that's the case, then it doesn't make sense that we'd be modifying. Why would we want to modify this header until authentication passes? That seems like just a wasted step, and we definitely don't want to forward.
But so if we move modify up, there is some YAML indentation problem here, maybe, I'm not sure. But if you put modify before extension ref, then in that case, we'll modify the header. Maybe we're adding a security header or doing some transformation. Yeah. And then we are sending it for authentication, right?
Yeah.
To clarify here, are these three actions all supposed to be list items? Like, should there be a dash? Well, that's a bad implementation, but something like this for modify? Or is it actually all part of extension ref? Or like, is modify and forward to also an action?
Yes, each of those are actions. Extension ref, okay, modify, and forward to are each actions.
Okay.
Did I mess the YAML up?
I think they're just missing the dash in front of modify and forward to.
Okay.
So to get back to the, I dropped a little comment at the top too. So let me read through this. So for option one, I just want to be clear, evaluated means that it's in the context of just reading in the config. It's not how the request gets processed. First action in HTTP route definition given the highest priority. Do we imagine that people will be writing normal? Like, why can't we just make that invalid if they have conflicts?
I mean, I think this example it does show that there are times when the order of the actions does matter. Yeah, for some actions, the order of actions does matter. You know, because in this case, what that actually means is that you want to ensure that the request is authenticated, then modify the headers, then forward it after that.
Exactly.
And you know, in the case though, if you could scroll back up, if we look at the other ones, like with like like in the split case though, like the forward to, you know, it's almost like forward to should actually take like a list itself rather than being a separate action.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And then you can say, like, if you have it be that the actions are an ordered list of actions to take in order to add to the request. And, you know, the forward to action takes, you know, a list of places to forward to with weights. And that way, you know, so the rule for adding an extension action is that it needs to be a thing that can be inserted into the filter flow, you know, and, you know, that can be inserted into the filter flow and, you know, and will sort of do something with the request and then hand it on to the next thing. So it's, I mean, they're kind of like filter, you know, what you'd call in Envoy or something like that, filters. yeah, with a slightly more generic name.
Yeah, that
I
would
think
be my
Nick's-
question. Sorry,
That's
go ahead, James, or whoever was
Okay,
talking.
thanks. Yeah, I think Nick's suggestion here makes sense and it clarifies, but you could also invert that. And one way to read this is to say that what weight means is a percentage of that action happening. So in principle, you could say that the weight could apply to any action. And so as you walk down the list of actions, this action, you could read the weight as going, we do this forward to action, but only 70% of the time. Then we do the next one, but only 30% of the time, and so on and so forth. So you could think of weight as being a qualifier for any kind of action, and you could apply it. You could have a weighted, weighted header modifications and stuff like that. I do think Nick's suggestion is clearer and more explicit. So
would having the
Basically-
weighted header modifications, would that be a thing that you would use for canarying or something then?
yeah, I suppose so. You could use that to
That
express
sounds like a cool
some-
feature.
I'm
That
sort
with
of
option 2.
skeptical that any of this is portable across different proxies.
Yeah.
exactly. So let's maybe, Tinian, I don't know if you want to add anything to option 1. Maybe I can quickly explain option 2, which takes a little bit of different approach.
Yeah, let's go to option 2. And Harry, I appreciate it if you could lead that discussion.
Yeah, so with option 2, we sort of keep the actions, have some special actions. The forward to is a pretty special action. Most proxies will do it the same way, and most of the time you need a forward to. So here we are looking at the first one. This is the easy path where you match on something and then you forward to. Right? That's the basic path.
Harry, just to double check, I'm scrolling down. It's the first block with the black. Oh, okay, thank you, Rob.
Yes. So that's the so there's that. And so if you look at option 2, simple traffic split example, we see that you have traffic splitting going on, but the traffic split is being defined under a single forward to. Okay, so instead of you having 2 actions which denote forward to, you have one action with multiple weights. So this clearly specifies that you can have you can have traffic split only under forward to. So this sort of narrows down the API a little bit, but it probably or maybe makes the implementation a little bit, it makes it possible to be implemented by multiple proxies. So until here, we have no ordering or any confusions, right? So let's go down to the in the option 2 traffic mirror example. Now mirror 2 is again a special action here. It's because it needs to be supported in the core API. So think of mirror 2 and forward 2, they are supported in the core API. So if all the traffic that we are sending, we are mirroring all the traffic to the mirror service here. Maybe we can add a percentage or a filter there as well in the core API, or maybe that is an extension. So now if we scroll down here into traffic split header, so this is specifically for the Knative use case. Here is where we actually introduce sort of actions. And now we can discuss extension points, which is what this example and the next example discusses. So as we can see, we already have forward to, and we have 2 forward to in this case. We have one with weight 70 and one with weight 30. So foo1, foo2. Before that, we have an actions array, which is evaluated before any forward to is performed. So the first request comes in, you add a header common foo, and then you forward. And when you do forward, this is where things get a little tricky, and maybe we want to keep the second actions that we have on a per target basis. That might be an extended API, or maybe that's a core API. That's something we need to decide. So you then modify the header, and you modify the header differently based on which target you are doing, right? And modify is one action that you are performing. Implementers might extend functionality. So this is an extension point, which is what the next example talks about. So if we scroll down again, Rob, let's go to the last one, extending custom functionality. And this is where the actions extensions come in. And ignore the naming of keys here. They don't respect the Kubernetes conventions everywhere, but so we have forward to going down at the bottom, and we have three actions that are being taking place. So one is a proxy vendor's custom resource that is like doing some authentication, and maybe the user has also implemented some service mesh, and that's doing some rate limiting here. And these are then treated in order. So you first configure, you first do the authentication, then do rate limiting, then do modification, and then do a forward to.
I see. So you have pulled. So this is like more specialized than the previous one in that the forward to is understood as like the very last thing, if you're thinking about it in terms of filters. And then you optionally have actions that's an ordered list of how to process stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little tricky, because I don't know if all implementations can support the same ordering. So that's why maybe actions are more implementation specific, where the ordering can vary, but forward to and mirror to are core APIs which have defined behavior where actions will take before these or after these. So we make
I think
specialized.
Go ahead, James.
So a lot of these pipelines, there's kind of some steps which you will do, but there's some steps which you do in a pipeline, and then there's a terminating step, which is in this case the forward to. So that's what you do. That's kind of where the proxy hands it off. I know some ingress controllers, we've had to request for this too, will terminate the request with, you can specify a redirect or a particular response or something. So in this second case, how would you express doing something like that, which terminates the pipeline but is not a forward to?
I think we would have to add it. That one sounds like common enough that I would imagine it'd be portable. Like respond with 404 or something.
Yeah, so in this case, you have to authentication that resource, right? You could probably evaluate this in a way that, okay, if authentication fails, send back 401 usually, and then if rate limiting happens, send 429, and then you don't even get to modify or forward to.
Yeah, I think like there are a set that in my mind would be widely portable as a terminal node. For example, like respond with 404. I'm pretty sure like almost everything under the sun is able to do that. So that's likely to just be by itself as a terminal. It is a good point of like how many of those are there that are in that situation. The other one that comes to mind immediately is the redirect to HTTPS, which I know on the Google Cloud Ingress controller has gotten some spicy comments on GitHub, but it's definitely a common use case.
Yeah, those could be like actions that we can support. So here modify is part of the core API. So maybe we can have an action where which says redirect to or redirect. I mean, that word makes sense here. And then we have a status code field. You can have 301 or 302 or 307 or 308.
So since you guys have taken a look at these two options, like, is there one that you guys are more leaning towards, or you presenting these both as equal.
We actually didn't discuss that part, Daniel, right?
No, we haven't, and yeah, I mean, I guess I was just hoping to get feedback from the community and then kind of just gauge, you know, what the community favors. So I don't know
So
if
I
it
think
makes sense.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is going to be to do it such that it's very clear to the user what's going on. And then the second is to make sure that it's portable. I'm biased in that option 2 seems to be more towards that, at least from a clarity perspective. Although it would be good to then take what we have here and then just carve out like the set of primitives I see for mirror, forward, maybe redirect, maybe status code, and then extension, and see how it maps to the various implementations. As I've been hearing, and I think James, you said, actually multiple people have said, like, how much of this is actually, if you allow the full set of reorderings, it's going to be possible to be implemented by the various proxies. So that I think would be the next step. Like if we can find some core set that is portable, then it seems like a way forward. Because we can sketch all sorts of fun ways to compose the rules, but if it can't actually be done by like 75% of the proxies out there, then it's almost asking too much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe like, can we have more implementers look at it and like see, like weigh in their opinion as to what is possible, what is not? I know some are hanging in the call.
Yeah, that would be helpful because it's challenging for me to go across all the implementations and try to figure it out. So if we could get some feedback from the different implementations, that'd be helpful.
Do you guys want to, I know you have some pretty good examples here. Do we want to create a list of the common stuff? Basically some easy checklist that people can look at that's like one page or something that's like, can you do this? Can you do this?
Yeah, maybe what we do here is just kind of add a table at the bottom of you know, implementation and then common actions. So we're talking like mirror, redirect, those kinds of actions, right?
Yeah, I think it's also important. I think Rob mentions this in a couple of his comments. Is, you know, how many like proxies can do support mirroring or what's the other one, the splitting, but doing both at the same time. And I think there is like one super complicated, yeah, this one, I think it's this one, where it is doing a mirroring and a traffic split. We can probably like lay down these options and see, can like implementation X and Y and Z support this or not. That's
Yeah, it's hard to get a table to really explain this specific kind of functionality, but yeah, this at least for our cloud perspective, it would be challenging to do, or maybe impossible to do, forward to traffic splitting plus mirroring plus modification at one point.
Yeah, like the question of like, is mirror happen before modification or after modification? Like those are the picky things that probably it's going to be very hard to agree, sort of get common portability across. But it would be good to understand even like, is mirror to itself in extended, or is it going to be in the core portable? Feels like it has to be in the extended. Modify header seems like it should be portable, but where it can live, it has some questions. And then like things that are probably for sure in the core are going to be forward to, return a status code, I hope, and potentially redirect. Like those three I see as just like table stakes for any kind of proxy today.
What about traffic split?
Traffic split, I think, let's see if we can make it also the table stakes.
Yeah, so traffic split is very interesting because I know Danien's one of main motivation was to support Knative, and if you scroll down to option 2, there is a Knative example. What happens is you can have modification at 2 layers. So here we can see that there is a modification of common foo, and if you scroll down a little, there is again a modification of headers after you select a target. Right, so there are 2 modifications before and after selection of the targets. In case of Knative, you have to do it the after one. Like that's how their architecture works. You need that. So this is where it also gets interesting, where can proxy support like one or the other or both?
We might be able to say, and this totally depends on how understandable this is for a user, that we will allow you to express like pretty much very flexible ordering, but the controller will tell you like, hey, I actually can't do this. Like you are putting it in the wrong place. That's one strategy to get around this. It's not great because they have no static guardrails, but it's one way around this problem. I do wonder, Knative, do they support before and after modification, which you have here?
Yeah, I asked that question in the doc, not in this doc, but in the Knative doc, and haven't received any feedback.
From what I have used Knative and putting the integration in Kong, they support at the modify layer, and then they support traffic splitting. But for traffic splitting to work, you need to, like the proxy needs to add some headers, otherwise the traffic is ignored by the upstream, because they send the traffic to a common deployment, and then that actually forwards the traffic to the serverless functions. So you need it at both the layers. And Kong currently does not support traffic splitting for Knative exactly for this reason, because Kong cannot do modification after a target is selected.
Okay, this is a great overview of the problem. I think our next steps are to write up kind of the atomic elements, I guess, of this filter chain plus forward to, and then see how we feel about either mandating a more reduced model or allowing people to write the atomic things and reorder them, but perhaps not every ordering will be possible to be portable.
Okay, so Daniel, I have some thoughts. Maybe I'll put down some more, like a table at the bottom of this document, and then we can iterate on that and then get it out in the Slack channel.
That sounds great. So yeah, if you start putting the table together, just ping me when you think I'm ready to contribute to it.
Yep. And is there a GitHub issue that is like solely focused on this one, so that people who are just watching GitHub can get notified?
I think it's like there's a lot that are point-wise towards this. I know, Daniel, you even have PRs that are kind of like dancing around it.
Right. Yeah, let me go to those PRs and put a link to this doc.
Yeah, this is pretty good. I think we can make progress.
Yeah, agreed. I guess we should spend the last 20 minutes or so going through issue or PR triage. I know there's been a number of new issues and PRs that have come through, and I just wanted to highlight this because I think it's cool. James' API documentation made it through, so we now have proper API spec and API docs on our docs website. So yeah, that's
So
exciting.
something to watch out for with this, there's an issue that I dug into last night, is that the source code parser that this ends up using collapses Go alias types. So all the different kinds of ref, none of the different kinds of ref are documented properly. It all comes down to a single arbitrary one, the config map local reference or something like that. So we need some kind of workaround for that documentation to show up properly.
I also
Yeah,
noticed that how come the resource types only has gateway class, TCP route, and traffic split? The last two are like the ones that we actually.
So the
aren't like-
resource
we missed-
types, which ones did we miss?
HTTP route.
Oh, oops. Yeah, we should
Whoops.
do that.
Yeah, I missed that.
So the documentation generator looks for the plus gen client thing, the plus gen client annotation to decide what to put up there.
Yeah.
So we just need to sprinkle plus gen client around the place.
What I was going to say on that note of it messing up the alias types, like we ran into the same issue with protobuf generation. I think Danian was at least involved in debugging that. And so maybe if this is the second time we're running into this issue, we should just move away from alias types altogether.
So I
It
don't
looks
know if
like
this
you
is.
can.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Oh no, after you.
I was just going to say, like, I looked into the quote unquote semantics of alias, and apparently, at least in the reflection level, aliases completely disappear, and you can't tell an alias was there. But I don't know what that
Yeah.
means for the parser.
You can tell it's there. So I've filed a bug against GenGo with this. You can tell it's there, but you have to do it just right. So you end up with, in the Go package, which deals with the source code parsing, you end up with a type name and a type. And all aliases have the same type struct, but they can have a different type name. So you can detect it at that point. So it is, in theory, fixable, but it's not clear to me whether it's fixable without breaking a whole bunch of stuff across Kubernetes in general.
Yeah, that was the reason I saw on that Golang proposal why they didn't bother distinguishing it in reflection.
So there is no distinction in reflection. It is literally the same type, but it has a different source code name. So from a reflection point of view, there is no distinction at all.
Okay, this is awesome. I love rating this better than the Kate's documentation, unfortunately.
Yes.
There is one workaround which I thought of, which we could try, which in the issue I put an example of, but it looks weird for protobuf. So if you embed their types inline, then you can do it, because each different kind of reference becomes its own type, and you inline. So you use the JSON inline to get the fields. So it's just like object meta does, but in protobuf, I think you still need a local name. It doesn't actually inline. Like protobuf doesn't have the concept of inlining like the JSON marshaller does.
That is fascinating. Huh. Yeah, I feel like if we're going to, remove aliases in some form, we might as well do it all the way just for the sake of protobuf gen. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Open to ideas there. But it is unfortunate that we attempt to support protobuf, but then our protobuf is rather screwed up right now, at least.
So what does protobuf do with the aliases? It doesn't see them. It doesn't see the alias names, right?
Yes, I think it's the names that are screwed up. I can't remember exactly how it's messed up. I remember seeing it in one of Danian's PRs, but then it had existed.
It's basically the same thing.
Forever.
I think it just merges all the aliases as if they were the same thing, and it's like the first one that it saw. That's my impression.
Yeah.
So probably they're like doing exactly the same thing as Django, I imagine, and the alias was never taken care of.
That sounds probable. Well, I mean, I think the protobuf generation uses the Kubernetes Django package, and Django doesn't expose the information through its API, so they're kind of stuck too.
All right, well, thanks for the work on that. I guess we should move on. Are there any issues or pull requests that we should really try to get to today in the last bit of time we have? I think pull requests, we're starting to get caught up on them. Bowie, you have a significant pull request here that already has some discussion going on. Specifically around what exactly core, extended, and custom support levels are.
Thanks for all the feedback. I'm going to add all this in, and hopefully people are generally okay with the text here.
Yeah, I think so.
I have one PR. I think Mikaya and James both are here. Yes.
Yep.
We need to I think it's almost there. We're not sure what do we do with specifying the space semantics of headers. If you scroll all the way down, I think we.
Oh, right. Yes. I looked at this.
What do we do with the space? And this like specifying it gets tricky. Not specifying it safer. I'm not sure.
So at least proxies that I'm aware of, you can't specify anything. The white space that you see on the wire is not exposed through APIs. And proxies are generally free to reorder white space in unpredictable ways.
Any comments on that?
So does that mean we have to leave it unspecified what the behavior is?
The behavior around white space, I would leave it unspecified. I don't think you can match, for example, you can't do things like say you have a multi-valued header. You couldn't match on a header. You couldn't do a match where you say a header has this value and like 3 space characters between it.
So the suggestion is just not specify how to handle white space then and let it be implementation specific?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this layer, there's nothing we can, I don't know that there's anything we can usefully say about white space at this layer,
Yeah.
because the proxy APIs have a value, and they're going to give you the value of, they're going to give you a field value.
Yeah, I understand it's going to vary by implementation. It's just going to be really frustrating to users of this API if they don't know the semantics. If they have to look at the specific implementation, and there's no guarantee that a rule will work the same on one implementation as it works on the other. So I think the very least we should do is say that this will vary from implementation to implementation. So whatever rules you set, they may be non-portable.
But what are the semantics that you think, what are the semantics that people are expecting with regards to white space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like HTTP keys cannot have spaces, and then values can be matched on spaces if there is text around it. I mean, non-space characters around it. But that would help, Micah, if you could help, like, give an example, maybe.
So is it just, Micah, is your concern that if there was white space in one match, an exact match as an example, it might match with one implementation and not another?
Right.
Got it.
That
So
so I guess it depends if the white space is inside the value. If you have white space inside the value, that's a different question than white space outside the value, the field value.
yeah, it's been a while since I looked at this, but yeah, if I understand you right, you're saying there's white space in the header value and there's white space in the string you're matching against it, right? So we need to find semantics around both of those.
So I think that's not quite what I'm saying. So in a HTTP header on the wire, you have the header has you have fields which have a name and one or more values, and you can have white space in that line, in the packet which is sent on the wire. You can have white space in there. That white space is not part of the field value, and so won't be available for matching on. Now, you can also have a field value, which I believe is closed in quotes, which would allow you to include white space, but that's just part of the field value. So here are we talking about white space which appears in the HTTP header serialization, or are we talking about white space which appears inside a HTTP header field value?
I was thinking inside the value, but now that you mention it, yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, but inside the value, the semantics are pretty much same across the proxies. So if you have a header, hello-world is the key, and the value is welcome to Kubernetes. And then welcome space to space Kubernetes. And those values will be preserved.
Yeah, that's correct.
You mean inside the string?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I would expect. Although, well, assuming it's not white space, we're talking about just, I mean, new lines, we're just talking about spaces. possibly tabs, right?
Yes, I don't think headers support new line.
No, headers don't support new line. You'd have to percent encode that. You have to encode that or something. So the actual line in the commit is, it says neither leading nor trailing white space is stripped.
Yeah, so if you have,
So in fact, to be spec compliant, you do have to strip white space from the on the wire serialization format.
right, so even if you, most proxies, if you supply the value as, you know, space, welcome space, the value actually goes as just to welcome, I think.
Yeah. Additionally, if you have a field which has multiple values, there's two. You can represent that as a single name with a comma separated value, or you can represent that as, you know, the name and value appearing multiple times with different values, and proxies are free to do either of those, and they can change at each hop.
Would it be reasonable to say that the match is against the last value?
That is another area where it gets pretty tricky. The match, usually, again, whatever I have seen is it matches against any of the values.
Yeah, I think matching multiple values is sort of an orthogonal decision to white space. Any of the values sounds reasonable. You can't depend on a specific ordering of values.
Wait, the standard lets you reorder?
Yeah.
Yes, the headers can be reordered.
Even, does that apply even for something like a forwarded header? That doesn't seem right.
Can you reorder forwarded header? I don't know. I'd have to look up the RFC.
I
But
would be
in
really
general, you
surprised.
can.
I would be really surprised if you could reorder the forwarded header, and I would be almost as surprised if forwarded were a special case.
But in case of forwarded header, I think the semantics are that like additional IPs are appended to the same value. You don't have multiple headers.
Well, it's two ways of expressing the same thing, right? Actually, I just my personal experience, I feel like I've more often seen multiple header lines added when you have multiple proxies adding exported for or forwarded. But yeah, you could put them on the same line. And one question would be, do you treat that the same way for matching purposes or not? And in any case, it might be useful, especially for things like forwarded, to be able to say, I want to match the last or the next to last, or allow if any matches. That would be, or I would think that would be orthogonal to the match type, but it would fit into this schema where you're saying, what are you matching? Maybe the last instance of the header. How are you matching substring match? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. But so yeah, we need to probably clarify or keep the behavior, you know, implementation specific in case of headers with multiple values, because proxies will do different things with multiple values as far as we can imagine. We can document that as this is supported for single header values. Is then multiple header values, you need to look at the implementation. Is that something acceptable?
Yeah, or we could leave the multiple headers case as a separate issue and not let it hold this up. I'm not sure I'm ready to let it go right now, but I don't want to necessarily hold up this PR on that point.
Yeah, I think we can deal with multiple header match, like what we think matching against multiple header values means. I think that like the header match type exact is a little ambiguous when there's multiple values, because we would need to say that it matches whether exact matches all the values or any one of the values exactly.
I see. So let me open a GitHub issue to track this multiple headers conversation we just had, and remove the white space if that's okay, and then maybe we are good to go.
Yeah, thanks. I think
Yeah,
I'm
I
good.
think that makes sense.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, well, we've hit time. Thanks for everyone coming out. Yeah, this will be great. Here you're gonna follow a follow-up. You're going to file a follow-up issue for this, and once that's good, I think this PR is about ready to go, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'll take another pass at it. It's been a while, so
Okay.
yeah. So thanks, Rob.
All right.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Micah and James.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.